Imagine walking into a fast food restaurant and when you go to place your order, there's no cashier standing there. Instead, it's an iPad with Zoom pulled up and there's someone overseas who's taking your order virtually. Now, this story is going viral. There is so much outrage on the internet about what this is. People are already doing this in restaurants in New York. And so in this video, I'm going to dive into what are people saying about this and why I actually don't think it's such of a bad thing and why it actually could benefit you, especially if you're an entrepreneur. So let's dive in. Now, when my client showed me this article, they sent it to me, I was actually more surprised, not that this is happening, but that people are so angry about it. Because just last week, I went into a McDonald's and there was nobody to take our order. We put our order on the screen ourselves. It came out wrong because we couldn't figure out how to input it correctly. So to me, I'm just happy that someone is there to put the order in for me and make sure it gets in correctly. But also, I think people are maybe just realizing how much of customer service jobs are being outsourced. If you go to anyone's website and there's a live chat or email support, that is probably already being done overseas. These large technologies and apps that we use all the time, most of the back end is built and managed overseas. So I don't know if people didn't realize that was happening or just actually now physically seeing it is what is triggering them. But again, this is already being outsourced. We can just now physically see it more. Now, I was reading through the comments and they're ugly. There is outrage. People are saying that this should be illegal, that these restaurants should be banned. They're gonna call for boycotts. And one of the reasons why people are saying that this is so wrong is that it's taking away human connection, which is critical. And I agree, human connection is critical. It's very important. But first off, I don't know what kind of one-on-ones people are having with their cashiers currently, but it's not a meaningful connection for me for most times I check out. I used to be a cashier at DSW, so I always try and make conversation with whoever's at the cashier checking me out. How are you? Were you guys busy? Thank you. But it's not a meaningful conversation. And sometimes the cashier is so tired and burnt out that they don't talk at all. So if your source of meaningful human interaction is coming from a cashier, that might be a bigger problem. And also, when you are checking out with a virtual cashier, you can still have the same amount of conversation. You're still connecting to another human. It's through a screen. But in a post-COVID world, that's just kind of life these days. My entire team works virtually. We all love working from home and we meet all the time on Zoom. And I don't feel any less close to them because we're not physically in the same room. My sister lives in Europe and we video chat all the time. And while I love seeing her in person, video chatting is the next best thing. So to me, you can still get your human connection, even if the virtual cashier, but more importantly, your source of community should be happening not just with cashiers, but within your family, friends, neighborhood, and other communities that you've built up. Now, the second outrage I saw is that these screens are still asking you to tip your virtual cashier. Now, I think this is because there's just a lot of outrage these days about tipping in general. I was also a waitress, so I am pro tipping, especially if someone is based overseas. Tipping even 50 cents or a dollar means a lot more. And I think tipping is good karma. So I don't see what the problem is. The job is still being done. But if you're so against it, again, tipping is optional. No one is making you do it. So don't do it if you're against it. But again, I think it does give you good karma to tip well. Now, one of the biggest complaints, and this one I actually do understand, is that people are worried that this is going to take away jobs from the local community. And local economies and the local community is so important. But you have to look at the economy today. So many restaurants are going out of business and filing for bankruptcy. Look at Red Lobster. They are closing down most of their stores, and they cited cost of labor as one of the reasons. So let's just pretend that a restaurant like Red Lobster was a little bit more innovative and integrated some offshore team members to do this kind of work for them. Maybe they would have saved some money and not had to close as many stores, which ultimately would have saved more jobs. Now, again, I think people are also mad because they see that as the CEO CEO trying to cut costs and be greedy and make more money. But if this is done strategically, it could actually be a good thing, because if you cut costs in some areas with a virtual cashier, I'm hoping that the CEO and the board is actually using that savings to pay their current team members better. Imagine having a virtual cashier, but then the cooks, the cleaners, the managers are all making more money. To me, that's still a good thing. Or maybe they're just passing that cost savings on to their customers. Look at Costco. Recently, they announced that they're going to pay all of their employees better, and everybody was happy. And then about a week later, they also announced that their costs are going up, their annual membership is going up, and people are going to start paying more money, and that's the customers paying more money. So the customers are fronting the money to pay their employees better. So if you can cut costs in one way or the other and allow customers to still pay the same price and treat your current employees better, again, I think that is a win. You also have to look over the past few decades as technology has emerged. It has cut some jobs that then made you get jobs somewhere else. So let's look at telephone operators, for example. There used to be tons of telephone operators, but then as technology advanced, this position wasn't needed, and telephone operators found jobs in different companies, different industries, and the technology actually helped the general public. So in this world where things are going to go more virtual, more offshore, yes, maybe there might be less jobs for cashiers, but that doesn't mean there's no jobs for them at all. Hopefully they can find a better paying alternative somewhere else. Now, last thing, the salary of these virtual cashiers was dropped. I don't know if it's true or not, but they were saying that the cashiers who were doing this in the Philippines were getting paid about $3.75 an hour. Now, what this means is that the average virtual cashier in the Philippines was making about $600 a month. But the minimum wage for most Filipinos is about $200 a month, and the median salary is about $325. So these virtual cashiers are making double what the average person is making. So for them, they're probably quite happy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken this job. And I think what Americans have to keep in mind is that other countries have a lower cost of living. So I lived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for about 8 years, and we lived in one of the better areas of the capital city where all the shops and stores were, is where we lived. We had a cute little house, and we paid less than $200 a month for rent. And then we moved to Pittsburgh. We live in the suburbs, nothing super crazy expensive, but not the worst area either, but we're still paying almost $3,000 a month for our house here. So the cost is significantly higher in Pittsburgh than it is in a country like Ethiopia. So the same thing goes here, right? You can pay less because the cost of living is lower. There's these stories that came out about that this is virtual sweatshops, and you have to remember that, again, people chose this job because this is the best opportunity they had at the moment. And when it comes to physical sweatshops, well, I don't think anybody should have poor working conditions or poor wages for their work. There's been a lot of stories that Americans have boycotted a certain factory because they heard maybe the workers were only making $7 an hour, and then all the workers ended up losing their jobs and having to go back to like an outdoor farming work that they didn't want to do because Americans were trying to help them, but really we destroyed their jobs and made them have a worse job. So you have to remember that, again, that people are choosing this job because they think it's the best opportunity. So it's not slave labor. Slave labor is not paying your remote team members. And unfortunately, that is a trend I am seeing. In fact, I started Cradle because I saw so many Ethiopians getting jobs in global companies, and then the global companies would not pay them because they knew the Ethiopian couldn't sue them, couldn't bring a lawsuit against them. And so they were working for free, and it broke my heart. And so I wanted to create Cradle so that we could actually guarantee that our team members and the people we were hiring would get paid. And unfortunately, we have had a few clients who totally took advantage of us, who did not pay, who now that we look back at it, we're doing this to take advantage of African labor. And we as a company, of course, still paid our team members because that's who we are. But I'm saying that there are so many bad companies who hire remote team members and don't pay them. That's where outrage should be. But outrage for someone who's getting paid on time with a salary double than what their neighbor back home is probably making, I don't know if we need to have outrage about that. Last thing, I know this is going on and on, we also have to remember that the idea of paying for people who live in a higher cost of living is what we do here in the US. So the same company in America might pay someone in New York or LA a bigger salary because they know that the cost of living in New York or LA is significantly higher than someone who, let's say, lives in Ohio. So we were already doing this and accepting this idea. It's just the cost of living in a developing country has an even bigger range. Now, to sum this up, I understand why people are upset because it is something new. And I think there's a lot of fear behind taking jobs. And maybe that means that you're not as competitive and that brings fear. But this is first where the world is moving. If you follow Derek Gallimore, who is the founder of Outsource Accelerator, he has an entire book that talks about the global workplace and how this is the future. So again, this is where we're going, to a global workplace. And it doesn't have to be scary, especially if you understand it and can accept this trend and get ahead of it. As an entrepreneur or small and medium business owner, the ability to hire more affordable team members is a good thing. It means you can build your business. You don't need as much upfront capital. You don't have to rely on sharky investors. You can actually run your business yourself and be very cost effective and treat your in-house employees really good. So don't be afraid of this global workplace. Instead, make sure that it's set up to benefit you, your employees, and your customers, and take advantage. But enough of what I think. What do you think? If you have been to one of these restaurants in New York and seen a virtual cashier, what was it like for you? Tell me your experience. Tell me what you think. And I look forward to reading the comments. In the meantime, like and subscribe so you can hear more about trends in outsourcing and the benefits of hiring remote team members.